and we were locked away for almost 2 years, so that does things to people. Today I want to talk to you about a few of the myths and the things that have worked and haven't worked in my garden, and share with you a little bit about my journey. So if you've got some gardening to do or some housework to do or something that you can be listening along, this is the type of video you don't necessarily need to be watching. There will be some visuals, but you don't necessarily be watching to watch it. You could just listen to it. So put your ear, what are they called? Earpods, that's the word. Put your earpods in and bring you this revelation, hopefully for some people, and share with you what has worked for me. So we'll sit ourselves down in front of the chickens because they will think I'm talking to them, and I'm not, I'm talking to you, but they like the company, and because I'm talking, they love it. They just love the soothing company. So don't we all? What I'd like to talk about today is mainly soil health. So the topic of soil health has become quite controversial, and there's quite a lot, some tension even around it, which has been interesting to watch. But it's probably no more interesting than the tension around every topic that's ever raised on social media now, because that seems to be the way it is, which is really sad. Human interaction seems to have changed quite a lot over recent years, and I think it worsened when people were locked away for that period of time, and it has here. I feel things have changed quite a bit here, and I'm in Melbourne, and we were locked away for almost 2 years, so that does things to people. So returning to the garden, I started my garden probably out of that reason. I had a business, my husband had a business, and because of the lockdowns in Melbourne, it pretty much destroyed all of that, and we had to pivot dramatically. And financially, I was left for the first time in my life in a situation where I wasn't earning anything, and it was really difficult to even sell things online. I've never seen anything like it. So my situation, my husband pivoted, he started a new career. He had been in the process of transitioning, so for him it wasn't, the timing wasn't great at all, but he was already in transitioning stage. But for me, it was a cold stop for me, and I had to pivot like crazy, and everything I tried was pretty challenging. So I didn't start a gardening channel or a homesteading channel to create an income. I started because I moved into the garden for solace, to create a space where I could get away from the world, get away from all the news and just the anxiety and the community challenges and just everything really, and find a space where I felt safe, to be honest with you, and nothing bad could happen apart from aphids, So I started in this space, which we are on an urban block around, I think it's around the 900 square metres, but our buildings take up a lot of it, so there's not a great amount of land, and it's all kind of broken up into small areas, so it's kind of surrounds the home and what's now my studio, which was our home gym. My husband was a personal trainer, but that shut down. So it's got a lot of shade issues, and there's a lot of growing space which I did not think would grow anything because of the soil, the shade, all the conditions of those. But I have managed to grow, and I do think it's primarily because of the soil, the work I've done on the soil. So Just to elaborate on what I was just sharing, I moved into the garden because I felt like I could contribute anymore financially. I just felt like all the parts of me, the reasons that I did all the things that I do were stripped away, and I wasn't able to contribute out of them. So I felt like at least if I grew some food, I'd be able to contribute that way, and I would be able to support my husband that way. You know, by bringing food into the home, it would help financially. That was my main motivator, to grow food, so if anything else happened, we would have food. So the backyard, it was just chaos. It was a mess. It was the weeds were up here, and we did have 2 garden beds that had minimal attention, then left. You know, my husband and the kids were doing it. They would put it all together and weed it and plant out seedlings and tend to it for a couple of weeks, then go away. I would be home to look after it while I was working back then, and I would look after it, and then it kind of lost interest afterwards, and it would die. So everything was weeds. Like we had a couple of lemon trees, and just trying to think. We had a guava, a lemon tree, and bananas, and that was about it. So I said to my husband, can I have the yard now? The kids were not using it. They were older. They weren't using it anymore. It needed to be looked after, and we needed to do something with it anyhow. And I said, I just want to try and grow some food. Now I went back and pulled what I knew from many years ago about no-dig gardening. So I had a no-dig garden many years ago. I'm talking about year 2000. 2000, and it was growing fairly successful, and then I had a life change again. So then I didn't have a vegetable garden. I don't think I've really had my own vegetable garden since recently after that. So I knew that no dig was quite good, that you could put on top of really clay. We've got clay here, clay soil, and it would improve the soil in, over 12 months you'd have better soil, and the next year would be better again. Not that I got to get to that stage with my previous garden, but I could see the plants responding. So I decided to do that here and do the no dig. But what I did not realise was the grass here was incredibly persistent. We have the cooch cacao, I can't even pronounce it, I'll write it on the screen, and it just comes through, like you do the cardboard and that, and it just comes through. So I probably should have done thicker layers, more layers of cardboard, and I am going to trial that. However, I have had so much time wasted weeding and trying to keep on top of gardens and having it just beat me time and time again, that I have opted now more for the raised garden situation. So I still plant directly in the soil, but I am still weeding in those areas. So I have reduced the areas that are no dig in the sections where I have that problem grass. In the sections I don't have that problem grass, that I have other grasses, I've continued to do ground level no dig. But where there is a real problem with that grass, I've shifted a little bit. Now in hindsight, and this is where it gets tense with some people, because they're absolute no dig, it always works and that. And yes, I could put 5-6 layers of cardboard down, it may, but that grass seems to come in from anywhere. You just have a bit outside your area and it'll go underground and wait. And it's been known to wait for years and then come up. So I I don't have the confidence that that will work long enough for me to be able to manage the space. Now remember, going back to my motivation, it is to supply us with food. The secondary motivation with food was to supply us with food that I don't feel afraid to eat, because the way they're producing food now is so chemically laden that, you know, I don't want cancer. I'm getting older and I don't want to get sick because of the food I'm eating. And so I want to grow as much food that is organic as I can, and we cannot afford to buy all organic food and source that. So, you know, this is the answer for us. And as I've gone along, I've found even more reasons for doing this, which in a way have become even more important, but I've discovered that along the way. And I'll get into those later, but I want to return back to where we are and I don't want to lose focus. So the soil. So no dig is an option, but it's a better option if you don't have weeds that are going to get away and overtake your garden and make you want to quit, because basically that's what it came down to. I had something happen and I couldn't be in the garden for quite a few months, and then I felt like I'd lost all the work that I'd done, and that is, it's more than discouraging. I'm sharing this because I don't want anyone else to experience that and quit, because it is worth growing your own vegetables. You just got to find what works for you. Back to the soil health. In the areas that I did the no dig bed, I noticed a massive shift in growth with each year. So each season that I planted into those areas, I didn't put much else other than chicken pellet, manure pellets down. I didn't do all the amendments, but the wood chips that were down around it and the mulch that I used in it, which was usually sugarcane mulch because I was a little bit scared of getting weeds. Although I think at the start we used bales of pea straw. I used pea straw with more nitrogen in that, so I used pea straw, which I'm actually going to get some more of too. I haven't used it since. So I used that initially, and the ground, the life in the soil just took off, and I started to see the topsoil forming and the plants really responded. But the following year they responded even more, and I could tell the difference because I don't kind of plant a lot of things in rows in one place. I put a bit over here and I might do a zucchini over here and a zucchini over there, and you could see the difference with the ages of the mulched areas. You could see the growth difference, and it was notable. So for every year that you are putting in that effort, you are compounding and you're creating gold every year, and there's a notable difference. I found there was a notable difference in the growth. So even if you have a slow first year, the second year is going to look a lot different in that area. So building the soil is primary. Now with the raised beds, the existing raised beds were full of oxalis, so something just can't get rid of. Although I have heard that calcium helps. I've put a little bit of that into it, tried that, we still have it. So what I'm doing is just remulching, putting a barrier of newspaper or cardboard in areas and then remulching in patches. But this year, one of them I'm going to clean right out, remove the plants, put a thick barrier of cardboard, which I've just picked up because one of the neighbours moved in and had these huge boxes, which were perfect because there's no gaps in those. It's going to completely cover the garden. So I'll put a very thick layer of cardboard in there. I'm putting some fresh bored-in soil, which is not exactly clean, I found, and I do think it's going to need some work. I'm going to add some blood and bone and mulch it and put some dynamic lifter on the top, or what's the other chook, booster, one of those. Then I will continue with the gardens to use my comfrey tea, and which is sitting there like a gold brew, and I haven't actually used it. I've been using comfrey direct from my plants, but I haven't used that beautiful brew that I did quite a while back, which will be absolutely prime liquid feed. So I'm going to start doing that and putting more of my worm compost in, my worm castings, making teas out of that, and really activating the soil that I got in. So the soil that I got in, I've noticed the growth is okay, and it is cold, so growth is slower than normal, but I've watched some of the plants, and one of the plants that I put in there was the broad beans, and they did not respond too well. And I don't know if it's the broad beans, or because broad beans are like canary in the cave. They used to take the canaries down into the mines, and if they ran out of oxygen, the canary, poor thing, but the canary would die, and it would be just enough time for the miners to get out there before they realised they had no oxygen. So broad beans are very sensitive to herbicides and pesticides and anything that might be in the soil. And the broad beans I put in my new raised beds were curling up their leaves, and I didn't look great. I have since chopped them. I've cut them in half, and I have fed it, and I've added some rock minerals in there, some azomite, and they seem to be looking better. So I suspect it is the soil, and I suspect that because I found things like builders, the little crosses that go between the tiles. When a tiler puts the tiles on the wall and he puts these little crosses to separate, the separators, to separate, and the grout goes in there. I found one of those in the soil. I found plastic PVC plants chopped up, pieces of that. I found pieces of glass, plastic, wire, nails. So I suspect it could even have a little bit of residue herbicides in there, and I suspect they were probably using the new FOJO system, which is all our houses here, and you will have it in some of your countries, but we've got a green bin that you put all your green waste, and then it goes to a green recycling station and it gets turned into compost, and that compost can be brought into garden centres, and they mix it into the mountain soil and create these wonderful garden mixes. So I suspect that was the expensive mistake that I made in those beds, and there was some residue in there. So it's a little bit too late. I can't take it out and replace it and do all that now, and I only suspect it without doing a proper soil test. But what I'm going to do now is actually let nature do its thing, and I'll build that soil up, and I'll focus on putting nutrients in there and have nature take care of it. The rest of the plants look fine, and the broccoli is looking really good and it's heading up, but it's just my gut instinct that that's what I need to do to that soil. And with the garden beds that have the oxalis, I am putting that soil in, but I will put a lot of amendments in there to start with. Now, and like I said, that's not what I was doing before. I haven't had to do that in the garden. Things have grown successfully without all of that directly on the soil, because the goodness and the microbes are already in that soil. You can even take soil from different places and sift it to make sure you've got no weeds in it or anything, and sprinkle it in your garden beds and add those microbes into your garden beds. Think of it like collecting decorations for your cake from different places to make a great big variety explosion of wonderfulness on your cake. In this case, in the garden beds, it goes into the garden beds and makes the flavour better. So it makes the nutrients better, increases the nutrient variety and to your plants, so when you digest it you're getting more minerals and different things. So I just hope I'm not getting any herbicides in there. These are very deep beds that this is in, and they'll eventually, you know, descend down. And so as I feed that soil, nurture that soil, the goodness will be up in the top of layer. But like I said, I'm no expert. This is how I'm trying to navigate, and if you've got any advice, go for it. Comment below, and I'm all ears. I'm open to advice, just not sarcasm. So I don't think there's any need for sarcasm. I think we can all learn from each other and grow together to do better, rather than just trying to shoot each other down if you've got it wrong. So I'm happy to get things wrong, and that's why I've grown so much, I think, here too, because I was happy to experiment and just see what happens. You know, I wasn't scared of losing plants, and I was willing to wait to see if predatory insects would come in when I had pests, and when I learnt, you know, okay, well, for instance, the aphids, if you get a mass amount of aphids, they're going to breed up pretty quickly, and you probably need to get on top of most of them. I do a bit of squishing, some were left behind, and then by the time the ladybirds move in, they've got food, everyone's happy. I haven't had to douse it with stuff. Occasionally I use the natural soapy water and a little bit of a homemade white oil that's all natural. I use that on things like mealy bugs, but basically keeping the chemicals out of the soil is my aim. So soil health for me personally is about putting the least amount of unnatural things in the soil, synthetic things, plastic, but you know, there's places where you have to use that. You know, there is places where you do use that. I do use that, and I have to use that, and they're the resources I have, so I do. But I'm not a purist, and I am a realist. So I'm realistically doing all that I can to grow as much as I can in the most healthy way that I can, with what I have and what I can access, to make our lives more healthy, others more healthy, and be more responsible in the land that we occupy. So I'll just quickly mention chop and drop. Even though it deserves more than a quickly in this video, is getting a bit long. So I do a lot of chop and drop as well. I'm going to dedicate some videos to the way I compost, because I save a lot of time in the way that I compost, and I think it'll be valuable to others who are trying to do it all and trying to fit it all in and still maximise on the resources they've got. So, but I do a lot of chop and drop. I look for plants, and I have healthy plants that are good for chop and drop, growing for the foliage and using it that way. So I try to cover the soil ASAP and keep it covered and keep organic matter on it. So I do focus a lot on chop and drop. I do have compost, I do have the worm composting going. So I compost in different ways. I utilise the chickens. Chop and drop is a big one, and it's a great one for improving your soil. So if you are like me and you just want to get some good food on the table for your family, or for your partner, or for your husband, or for your wife, or for the food cupboard, or for your community, my encouragement to you is to do you, to try different things. I would encourage you to stay away from chemicals and to research better ways to deal with pests and deal with bad soil or increase the soil health. But you do the best that you can do, because at the end of the day, the food shortages are real, the pressure on that system is real, and we do have to think about moving forward. And it is a really good idea to start learning how to grow food now, if you haven't already. So you can start small, you don't have to have a huge amount of land, you can grow in pots. There's so many ways that you can grow some food, and If everyone did a little bit of that some food growing, it would take a lot of the pressure off the system and the medical system too, if we were all doing it organically. Yes, get growing. And thank you for visiting today on my channel. And I do hope I see you again, and I do hope I hear from you, because I am here not just to do this for my family, but to encourage others and connect with those who are like-minded. Okay, see you next time. Bye for now. Look at them, they're all snuggled up and going to sleep right behind me. I told you, those chickens find our voices so soothing. They know their owners, or the hedgehog. They're so cute. I love my chickens.